BTEC Human Biology A5 Cellular Injury and Repair Summary. This is part of the Unit 1 exam content. So first of all, cellular swelling. So this is impairment of the energy-dependent sodium-potassium pump, which usually maintains osmotic potential of the cells. If this sodium-potassium pump is malfunctioning, the sodium ions are not being removed, and that means too many potassium ions are pumped in, which increases the ion concentration inside the cell, which decreases the water potential. Therefore, water moves into the cell by osmosis, which causes the cell to swell. The effect on ATP production. If there's a decrease in ATP production in a cell, for instance due to damaged mitochondria or hypoxia, not having enough oxygen, then less ATP is available for the sodium-potassium pump, increasing the number of ions inside the cell, decreasing the water potential, and therefore water moves into the cell by osmosis, causing cellular swelling. If this cellular swelling is not reversed, it could lead to further cell injury. If cell swells and continues to take in too much water, it can burst due to high osmotic pressure. Red blood cells can undergo osmotic lysis. New research indicates that cellular swelling can trigger a release of ATP. So if ATP is released, again the volume is restored. Hyperplasia. So hyper means lots of or too many, plasia means cells. So hyperplasia is an increase in the number of cells, and mitosis happens quickly. Abnormal hyperplasia can develop tumours by unregulated mitosis. And remember that tumours can be caused by damage to DNA, and it could be caused by a mutation in the tumour suppressor gene, which then leads to uncontrolled mitosis and therefore tumour formation. So tumour formation by damaged DNA. Damage to DNA may cause mutations in the tumour suppressor genes which regulate the cell cycle. Damaged cells divide uncontrollably, and damaged cells do not undergo programmed cell death. Hypertrophy. Trophy means getting bigger. So hypertrophy is the cells getting bigger, enlargement of cells. So the cells themselves are getting bigger, hypertrophy. Cardiac hypertrophy is enlargement of the heart muscle. Increasing the wall size of the ventricles decreases the volume of the ventricle inside the ventricle, and therefore causes a lower stroke volume, which is the amount of blood forced out by the heart, and less oxygen is delivered per beat, which can lead to a heart attack. So atrophy is the opposite of hypertrophy. It's getting smaller. So the atrophy is the cells wasting away, getting smaller or less cells. So atrophy is less cells or getting smaller. Metaplasia. So meta means change, plasia means cells. So metaplasia is a change of cell type. So it's when one mature cell type or one differentiated cell type is replaced by a different differentiated cell type. So it's a change from one cell type to another. Responses to tissue injury. So it could be inflammation, blood clotting and regeneration. So blood clotting and scab formation. So damage to blood vessels can release blood clotting factors. This releases something called thromboplastin from the platelets. Thromboplastin catalyses the conversion of prothrombin to the enzyme thrombin. Thrombin becomes active, converting the plasma protein fibrinogen to insoluble fibrin, And these fibrin fibres form a mesh that are attached to platelets, and that is what causes a clot. Swelling or edema. So this is accumulation of tissue fluid in response to inflammation in an area. Also increased movement of white blood cells into the tissue fluid to the site of infection or injury. The inflammation response. If damage occurs to the capillaries, plasma proteins leak out into the tissue fluid, causing water to follow by osmosis. Other than swelling, inflammation symptoms are redness, heat and pain. Bruises. When blood vessels such as capillaries are damaged and then rupture, blood then collects beneath the skin. A burst blood vessel can lead to internal bleeding. Depending on the size and location of the rupture, there could be serious consequences, both in terms of loss of blood volume and the effect of the accumulated blood putting pressure on the surrounding tissues. So an aneurysm, for instance, which is a ruptured blood vessel, a burst blood vessel in the brain, can be very serious. Cell injury. So swelling of the endoplasmic reticulum and mitochondria can occur with further cell injury. The cell membrane breaks down, as do the organelles and their nuclear membranes, which can cause leakage of the cell contents, which leads to inflammation. Ischemia is an inadequate blood supply or oxygen to an organ or a part of the body, especially the heart muscle. Hypoxia is low. Hypo means low. Hypo. So low oxygen saturation of the body. So not enough oxygen gets to the blood. Anoxia is where no oxygen gets to the blood. Causes of hypoxia, anoxia and ischemia is, it could be that a blood clot has formed in an artery, such as a myocardial infarction or stroke, narrowing of the artery that supplies the tissue, such as vascular disease. The consequences of hypoxia, anoxia and ischemia, repeated cell injury can lead to atrophy and eventual necrosis of cells in that area. Effects of cell membranes. So things that can injure the cell membranes of a cell are nutritional imbalance, which can affect the composition of a membrane, physical trauma, which physically breaks the membrane, extreme temperature, which causes the proteins in the cell membrane to denature, the immune response, damage to cell membranes by white blood cells, damage from pathogens because toxins can be secreted, or the pathogens can cause physical damage. Necrosis. This is tissue or cell death due to lack of oxygen. Causes of necrosis can be trauma, vessel blockage, extreme heat or cold, or loss of nerve supply. And the mechanisms of necrosis are failure to generate ATP, lack of respiration, and damaged cell membranes. Chronic diabetes is a severe condition in which the body cannot control blood sugar levels, and it can lead to cellular atrophy. And then the final one is pressure sores. These are injury to the skin and possibly underlying structures due to constant pressure over bony prominence.